Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to be taking a look at an idea. It's kind of a tricky idea that you can play against either the mainline Taimanov variation, or you can even play this idea against the Lasker Pelican variation. I think I'm going to be calling this video, Oh No, My Bishop, only because people on YouTube seem to like titles like that, so I'm going to give it a shot. Also, if you like my content, and if you like content like this, go ahead and click that subscribe button and click the bell icon so that you'll be notified every time I make a new video. So anyways, this comes out of the main line of the Taimanov. It happens after e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight c6, knight b5, aiming at that weak square on d6. And then after the move d6, the move bishop f4, and then the move e5. And then the move that I like to play here, and as you can see, I'm actually going through the opening explorer here, and I'm looking at my own personal blitz games on chess.com. And as you can see, I scored pretty well here with my move, which is my oh no, my bishop move. I play the move knight on 1 to c3, and I go, oh no, my bishop. And if they want it, they can certainly take it. And actually, they have another move here that transposes to the Lasker Pelican. They can play a6, and then you can repeat the oh no, my bishop idea. You can play the move bishop g5, attacking the queen, and you can say oh no, my bishop again, which is kind of hilarious. Actually, if they take it, as you can see, I have a 100% score if they take it. And I have a pretty good score when they do other things, too. But let's just say they take your bishop. They go ahead and they take your bishop. Oh no, my bishop, and they go ahead and they grab it. So the idea is you play knight d5, and already there's this threat to win the game with the move knight c7. So you're going to get at least an exchange back. So if they play the move rook b8, for example, as you can see, I've had this happen 6 times, and I've won 6 times with a 100% score, because it's basically forced mate. You're going to play knight c7, king d7, and then you're going to play queen g4 check, and there's only one move. There's f5, and then queen f5 is actually checkmate. So that's one quick way that you can potentially win the game if they try to save their rook. So the best thing that they can possibly do here is they can play the move bishop e6, which you can see I had quite a few people do this, and then you go ahead and get your exchange back, and they take back with the queen, and then I've played the move bishop b5 repeatedly because there is this little trap here, like if they play the move a6 here or at any point, you have this really cutesy fork that you can throw in. And this threat is actually kind of a persistent threat. So it stays in the game for like a long period of time. So you kind of want this threat to hang out. So now, a lot of my opponents have played various different moves here, but the one that gets played most often and the most common, as you can see, I've had a6 played against me twice in 100% of my games. The one that's the most common is the move knight f6. Now, it's taken me a long time to try to figure out kind of what to do against this move, and I think the move that I've played in the past isn't all that good. The move that I've played kind of repeatedly in the past is the move queen f3, and I think this is actually a little second best, especially when they take their queen out of the line of fire immediately with a move like queen d8. As you can see, I'm scoring very badly against that. I think what you need to do instead is play the move that I've only really tried once. I think you need to castle. I don't think this move was incorrect. And then I think the idea here is if, for example, they take, and I'll just go ahead and I'll bring up the analysis board for this. So if, for example, we'll go into ef4 and then castles. If they take with knight takes e4, I'll go ahead and click on self-analysis and you can check it out. We have just an interesting way of playing chess here. We can basically just open the lines against the king, like we can play rook e1. And then after the knight retreats, like say knight f6, then we're going to continue with the move c4. And the whole point is we're getting ready to blow everything open with c5, and we've got like tons of open lines here against the king. And of course, we're still giving ourselves maximum traction on this little trap. He can still play a6 at any point. So if he plays the normal looking queen d8 to sidestep all of this, basically we can just keep aiming at the king with a move like knight f4. And here we should have plenty of compensation for the material, because we are actually down material here. We're down 2 pieces for the rook. But we have plenty of compensation because the king is in the middle, and of course this is undeveloped. So we should have plenty of compensation for the little bit of material that we're down, and we have lots of open lines now to the king. and we have lots of kind of persistent threats that we can use to throw at our opponent. And it seems like the computer doesn't hate it either. So the other option that they have, I guess the one time that I played this in a game, I tried castles, and of course my opponent immediately played the move queen to d8. And at this point, of course, the jig is up. You might as well just go ahead and play knight takes f4, and this is probably the best way to go. And I feel like in this position, you do have a reasonable amount of compensation. So if I go back to my games, castles, queen d8, as you can see, in all of these cases, I tried to play something kind of other than knight takes f4. I tried queen f3, which had limited success. I tried rook e1, and I tried c4. But I think we just go with knight f4, and that's going to leave open the possibility of e4, and we can actually transpose into the other line. Like if they play knight takes e4, which is something I don't think we should be afraid of, now we can play rook e1, knight f6, and c4, and we're back in this other analyzed position where we have plenty of compensation for the material. So I think these are reasonable positions to try, and of course we've got a lot of traps along the way that they can fall into, where we can potentially win a queen, or we can win even more material than that. But I think the king being in the middle should yield us some type of compensation for this material. So if we go back, there's this other possibility we can transpose into a Lasker Pelican. The transposition into Lasker Pelican would happen after a6 and then bishop g5, and we say, oh no, my bishop, and then we say, oh no, my bishop again. So I don't know why people like this phrase, but I'm going to keep using it because apparently people on YouTube like it. So we're going to, if they play queen takes g5, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play knight c7 check. And the reason this is so incredibly good for white is because this knight has such a clear escape route. There's actually a cute trap in here too. Like after, say, king d8, and then you play knight takes here, a lot of people will play bishop g4. And then after bishop g4, as you can see in the one game where I played this, I played the move bishop e2, which is actually acceptable. Although I don't think I followed it up correctly. Like after knight d4, I played queen d2, which won. I mean, as you can see, I only have one game in this position. My opponent was decent, though. He was rated 2400 in this game. This was actually played recently. This was played July 23rd. So in this game, as you can see, I had a huge advantage going into this game. Bishop g4, bishop e2, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, knight d4. But I played the weak move here. I played queen d2 and just kind of grounded out. And queen d2 is fine. I still have an advantage. As you can see, I'm still up material. This knight is still escaping. I'm offering the exchange of queens. He's going to get a little bit of counterplay with queen takes g2, but after castle's queenside, there's not much doubt as to who has the advantage. You do have to sidestep this little threat of bishop h6, but that's pretty easy. And since your knight still has a clear path, this is still clearly better for white. White has much better than this, though, and I wish I'd seen this during the game. White can actually play queen c4, and he can allow knight takes c2 check, which I was afraid of at the time, which I shouldn't have been. After knight c2 check, you can simply play king d1 and attack this knight. And there isn't a good move, because we are actually threatening this really cool checkmate combination. I wish I'd seen this idea. The whole point is, if the knight retreats to d4, or if the knight takes on a1, basically black just dies in the next couple of moves. So like knight takes a1, now we have a forced sequence. Starting with king c7, king here, queen check, and if the king comes up, this is mate. And if the queen blocks, this knight comes back to c7, and then this knight comes up to d5, and that's checkmate. So you have kind of a cool little trap there, which is kind of neat. So they really can't take the bishop, but they can still try to refute this variation doing something else. And I've had quite a few people try this. You can try the move f6 here. So if we go back to f6 and we take a look at my stats on f6, so I've had quite a few people try f6. So let me see here. Where do I got to go back to my stats? I got to go back here. I got to go back again. And we're going to go to... We're loading my stats again, so we're going to go back to bishop g5, and as you can see, a lot of people have played f6. Oh, but I'm in master games, so I'm going to go back to just my games. But anyways, so f6, and then we had knight d5, and I mean, as you can see, this has been played before, apparently one master game where this has been played. Bishop e3, so a couple of big shots have tried this too, so not just me. So the idea here is bishop to e3, And then I'm going to go ahead and bring back up my games real quick. So here I am, I'm specifically back in my games, and as you can see, I played bishop e3, and you can see just my insane win percentage after bishop e3. I also want to correct, earlier I said this could be a Lasker Pelican. For the most part, when you're doing the oh no, my bishop line, it pretty much stays either a Taimanov, a Kalishnikov, or a Lowenthal would be the more proper definition. It can actually become a Lasker Pelican. It is technically a transposition into a Lasker Pelican if they play knight f6. If they play knight f6 here, we are back in the Lasker Pelican variation, as you can see. So there's a lot of transpositions in these lines. They kind of blend into each other. The Lowenthal, the Kalishnikov, the Taimanov, and the Lasker Pelican. And I'm a little lazy when I talk about openings sometimes, so sometimes I just refer to them all as the Lasker Pelican, because on top level play, and this is a little secret, almost all of these openings, no matter what move order they come from, whether it's the Taimanov or the Kalishnikov or the Lowenthal move order, almost all of them always become a Lasker Pelican in one way or another. So it seems like they all transpose. So it's like all the paths, at least in modern practice, seem to lead to Lasker Pelican. Very few people are playing independent Lowenthal or Kalishnikov lines. So they're mostly just playing this Lasker Pelican over and over again. But this would actually be technically considered an independent Lowenthal line, although it's a very strange one and it's very rare. So as you can see, like right here already, I have just tons of wins, great percentage. I'll go ahead and show you all my games from this position. Part of the problem is I am down a piece, but it's really hard to develop these pieces, and I do have these really persistent threats that are kind of hard to get rid of. Like, it's not clear exactly what black should do to meet any of these threats. It's very difficult. So I'll go ahead and show you all my games from this position, just so you can kind of see the caliber of player that I've beaten here. So I've beaten a number of titled players in this position. I've beaten an FM that was actually rated 2487 in this position. Actually, this game was pretty bad. I think I just kind of destroyed that guy. I've beaten several other titled players, some CMs, and of course this was an international master that I beat from this position, although that was kind of a complicated game. And yeah, here's one GM that I defeated in this position. If you want to take a look at that game, I can show you that real quick. So I mean, it is possible to beat Grandmasters in this position. It's actually just a really difficult position to play with the black pieces once we get to this point, once we play bishop e3, even for a Grandmaster. So after bishop e3, it's just like kind of an open question, like how do we meet this threat of bishop e3 knight here? And of course my opponent, he tried something that didn't really work out. He played bishop e6, which I guess is considered best by the computer, but I followed through. As you can see, I mean, just this one little error, queen d7, and all of a sudden white is completely winning. We're going to play knight c7, we're going to take, and then this is the big issue, is the knight gets out, we take the rook, and then the knight escapes. And now we're also going to have some weak light squares at some point. We're going to play bishop b5, we're going to play that bishop back to c4, possibly even taking on e6 at some point to loosen up these light squares around the king. And of course, we're still not quite developed yet. So all of this combined is a pretty big problem. So I'm taking the light squares away, I'm castling, I'm getting safe, and of course he's still behind, and his king is still sitting on a very juicy looking light square. So here I guess I actually play it kind of a weak move. I could have just jumped on the light squares immediately with bishop c4, which gives you an idea how weak the light squares really are. The point is he can't play bishop c4 because of queen d7, and this would have just been completely winning. Of course, what I played in the game wasn't terrible. My follow-through did end up winning the game. Of course, my advantage here is already quite large. I'm already up to like a +7, so I mean, you could argue just about anything could win from here. I have an extra exchange, I have a better position, and my development is superior to my opponent's. And these are the kind of things that can just kind of happen from here. So when you get to this position where the bishop is on e3, it's actually not clear exactly how black should defend. Like if they play rook a4, which is usually a remedy for situations like this, you can actually just play f3 and you can just kind of maintain all your threats of bishop to b6 and knight to c7, and the position is still super unclear. If they play like a direct attempt at a refutation, I've had several people try this rook b8. I think I actually beat a GM on Lee Chess that tried this. And you play here, And here, in that game on Lichess, it actually went, I played bishop b5 with the idea of bringing my bishop back to c4, and then my opponent actually played a very bad idea here. He tried to guard his king with g6, and this is actually just completely winning. And then here, and then as often happens in this position after knight e6, what's best is actually to simply sacrifice the queen for the 2 pieces, and then try to survive that position. And that's actually pretty survivable. It's really difficult for white to make progress after the queens come off the board. It's not terribly easy. You have to kind of make kind of slow moving progress with your queenside pawns and hopefully eventually create like a passed outside pawn. I think it's still advantage white, but it's actually much more difficult than it looks because black can actually finish this development. So I think the queen sacrifice is the way to go, not just in this line, but in several other lines. When my opponent didn't sacrifice his queen when he played king to h6, I played bishop e3, and then I played h4, and this position was just basically over. Interestingly enough, h4 is actually the second best move. Like queen g4 is probably winning faster, apparently. But h4 was a very easy move for a human player to find. It's very similar to the Damiano's defense, where we get the king over here and we do something very similar. In this case, the computer doesn't like it because it allows queen to e6, which my attitude is if the queen sacrifice wasn't on their radar a move ago, it probably isn't on their radar now. But in either case, white should be totally winning this position. So direct attempts at refutations aren't going to be very good here after we allow the move bishop b6. Another direct attempt is the move knight d4, and this also doesn't seem to be very good. We just play c3, knight back, and then we play bishop b5 check, bishop here, and then this cute little quirk of fate. Something has to land on d7, and then something just simply lands on b6 and takes on a8. And in this case, once we lose this exchange, we should have plenty of compensation for the material again, because the plan for white is really simple. He's just going to castle, he's going to play b4, he's going to play a4, a5, b5, a6, and he's going to create that passed pawn. And for some reason in this position versus the positions where the queen gets sacrificed, it's actually a little easier to make this passed pawn happen. I think it's because the queen is a very bad blockader of passed pawns, so it makes it very difficult for black to defend against that kind of pawn storm. So that's another way they can try to do this, is they can play knight to d4, and that doesn't seem to be totally satisfactory either. In the end, I'm not sure what a satisfactory defense is. Like another attempt I've seen a lot of is like queen a5 check c3. This appears to just be almost like just a raw mistake to try to hold this square, because the move bishop b5 seems very strong. Because after bishop b5, they can't play queen b5 because knight c7 gets the fork, and if they, of course, retreat the rook to a place like a8, they're giving you everything with tempo. So like rook a8, you can just watch the bar and it just kind of goes through the roof. I mean, we're just completely losing after a move like bishop b6. The queen is actually completely trapped. We can't even play queen takes b5 because just knight c7, knight takes b5, and we're down a whole queen. So after we play bishop takes b5, they have to just leave this rook on a6, and we can take it at any point. And then after we take this rook, we can then start following through with moves like knight c7 and bishop b6, knight c7, and castles kingside, etc., and then pushing our queenside pawns with some sort of advantage, for white. So it's a very difficult line to play against as black, because it's very difficult to develop our queenside, and this is what attracted me to it to begin with, is once they play this pawn to f6 move, even though we're down a whole piece, even though, oh no, we just lost a whole piece, it may not be a big deal, because it's very difficult for black to activate his material, and it's not so clear how black clears himself so that he can get to an equal position. Of course, there's still a lot of stuff to be worked out here. I could still perform better. I mean, I think 64% with this variation against like Masters, International Masters, and Grandmasters is a pretty good result. Of course, it is just blitz chess, but still, I think it's a very reasonable idea. You can use this idea to maybe beat some strong players of your own that aren't familiar with this concept. A lot of players aren't familiar with this idea because it is very rare, and it's a very strange kind of idea to play. You give up a whole piece, seemingly for the compensation of just kind of locking in black's kingside and weakening his light squares around his king. And that's pretty much it. That's the only compensation you have. But that seems like it's enough. I don't know if it's absolutely enough compensation in a perfect world, but it seems like it's more than enough compensation. At least it's enough compensation for 2 points of that material. Maybe not the whole 3, but certainly for at least 2. And if you're more familiar with the lines than your opponent, you can certainly use it to beat, even players as strong as GMs that aren't familiar with these variations and aren't familiar with these ideas. Anyways, I hope this idea helps you in your game. I hope you can use this idea to get wins of your own. I hope this idea inspires you to look for new ideas in chess. And if you like videos like this, if you like content like this, please go ahead and click that subscribe button and click that notification icon. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you learned something new about chess.